The chandeliers in the Ashford Mansion dining room cast golden light across 40 guests, but Vivian felt only shadows. She sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, positioned between her elderly Aunt Margot and a business associate, whose name she had already forgotten. From here, she could barely see her sister Camille at the head table, radiant in ivory silk, laughing at something her fiancé Gregory whispered in her ear. Vivian smoothed her simple, gray dress and reminded herself to smile. 29 years of practice had taught her exactly how to arrange her features into pleasant neutrality. Not too happy, which might draw attention. Not too sad, which might require explanation. Just present enough to fulfill her function and invisible enough to avoid scrutiny. Her mother Eleanor rose from her seat, crystal glass in hand. The room fell silent with the practiced obedience of people who understood old money and older expectations. Thank you all for joining us to celebrate my beautiful daughter Camille and her wonderful fiancé Gregory Thornton, Eleanor began, her voice carrying the precise warmth of a woman who had hosted hundreds of such evenings. When Camille was born, I knew immediately she was destined for extraordinary things. She has always been our family's brightest light, our greatest pride. Vivian kept her eyes on her untouched dessert plate, of course. We must acknowledge Vivian, Eleanor continued, and Vivian felt the familiar twist in her stomach. Our reliable oldest daughter. She may not have Camille's natural gifts, but she has always been useful. Someone has to remember the practical details while others shine. Polite laughter rippled through the room. Vivian heard Aunt Margot whisper something sympathetic, but the words dissolved before reaching her ears. She was already standing, already murmuring an excuse about needing air, already walking toward the garden doors with measured steps that betrayed nothing of the fire burning behind her ribs. The October night wrapped around her like cold water. She found a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree and sat down hard, pressing her palms against the rough surface until the physical sensation grounded her. Spinning thoughts. She had stopped crying at these events years ago. Tears required hope that things might change, and Vivian had abandoned that particular weakness long before her 29th birthday. What remained was something harder, a quiet anger that had nowhere to go. That was a terrible speech. The voice came from her left, deep and direct. Vivian turned to find a man stepping out of the shadows near the garden wall. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, intense and focused entirely on her face. "Excuse me?" she managed. "Your mother's speech," he said, moving closer. "It was cruel and inaccurate. I wanted you to know that someone noticed." Vivian straightened her spine. "I do not need pity from strangers." "Good," he said, and something like approval flickered across his features. "Because I am not offering pity. I am offering honesty. My name is Dominic Reyes, and I have been trying to meet you for 2 years." Vivian stared at the stranger, certain she had misheard. "You have been trying to meet me? I think you mean my sister." Dominic shook his head slowly, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I mean you, Vivian Ashford, though you probably know yourself better as Vera Nightingale." The name hit her like electricity. Vera Nightingale was her secret, the pseudonym under which she sold her paintings at a small gallery downtown. Nobody in her family knew. Nobody in her social circle had ever discovered that the quiet, practical oldest Ashford daughter spent her nights creating art that sold for thousands. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. "'Cause I own the Meridian Gallery," Dominic said. "I purchased it 3 years ago, specifically because I wanted to support emerging artists. Your work caught my attention immediately. The way you paint light, the emotion in every brushstroke. I have purchased 6 of your pieces myself." Vivian felt the world tilting beneath her feet. This man, this billionaire whose name appeared regularly in business magazines, had been collecting her art, had been searching for her true identity. "Why did you not simply ask the gallery owner who I was?" "I did," Dominic admitted. "She protected your privacy fiercely. I respected that. But when I received the invitation to this engagement party and saw the Ashford name, I hoped I might finally have my chance." Before Vivian could respond, the garden doors opened, Camille appeared in the doorway, her ivory dress glowing in the light spilling from inside. Vivian, mother's asking where you disappeared to. She needs you to handle the gift coordination. Camille's eyes landed on Dominic and widened. Oh, Mr. Reyes. I did not realize you were out here. Dominic barely glanced at her. I was just speaking with your sister about her remarkable artistic talent. Camille laughed, the sound bright and dismissive. Vivian, artistic. You must be confused. She handles administrative things. She does not create anything. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Dominic turned to Camille with an expression of polite frost. Then you do not know your sister at all, he said quietly. He turned back to Vivian and pulled a card from his jacket pocket. Dinner tomorrow evening. I will send a car at 7. He walked past Camille without another word, disappearing into the party. Vivian remained on the stone bench, holding his card like it might evaporate. What was that about? Camille demanded. I have no idea, Vivian lied. But something new was blooming in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. 3 weeks later, Vivian stood on the balcony of Dominic's coastal estate, watching moonlight scatter across the dark water. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could see him moving through the kitchen, preparing tea with the casual competence of a man who had learned to take care of himself despite his wealth. Their dinners had become conversations that lasted until midnight. Their conversations had become confessions, stories traded like precious currency. Vivian had told him about her childhood spent in performance of invisibility. Dominic had told her about building his empire from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success. You are thinking too loudly, Dominic said, joining her on the balcony. He handed her a warm cup and stood close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his body. I am thinking about how strange this feels, she admitted. Being seen. Being wanted for who I actually am, rather than what I can do for someone else. Dominic set down his cup and turned to face her fully. In the moonlight, his features were sharp and beautiful, his dark eyes holding something that made her pulse quicken. Vivian, he said softly, I need you to understand something. Every moment I spend with you confirms what I suspected from your paintings. You are extraordinary. Not despite being overlooked by your family, but perhaps because of it. You developed depth while they were busy with surfaces. He reached out and touched her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. Vivian leaned into the warmth. Years of touch starvation making the simple contact feel electric. May I kiss you? He asked. Instead of answering, she closed the distance herself. His lips were warm and tasted faintly of tea. The kiss started gentle, questioning, but when she pressed closer, it deepened into something hungry. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him. Her fingers tangled in his dark hair. They moved inside without breaking contact, stumbling toward the couch in his living room. Dominic laid her down gently, his body covering hers, his mouth trailing fire down her neck. Vivian arched into him, gasping at sensations she had denied herself for years. Tell me if you want to stop, he murmured against her collarbone. Do not stop, she breathed. Please do not stop. That night, wrapped in his sheets with his arms around her, Vivian felt something shift permanently inside her chest. She was no longer the invisible sister. She was a woman who was chosen, desired, and seen. Meanwhile, back in the city, Camille's perfect engagement was beginning to crack. The call came at 2 a.m. Vivian answered to hear her mother's voice, shaking with an emotion Eleanor rarely displayed. You need to come home. Gregory has been having an affair. Camille found photographs. She is devastated. Vivian arrived at the mansion to find chaos. Camille was curled on the sitting room couch, makeup streaked down her face. Her engagement ring sitting on the coffee table like an accusation. Eleanor paced nearby, alternating between fury at Gregory and attempts to comfort her younger daughter. Vivian, thank goodness, Eleanor said. Can you handle the caterers? We need to cancel everything, and someone should contact the venue. You know how to manage these details? Something inside Vivian snapped cleanly in two. No, she said. Eleanor stopped pacing. Excuse me? I said no. I am not here to manage details. I am here because my sister is hurting. Vivian moved past her mother and sat beside Camille, taking her hand. I am so sorry this happened to you. Camille looked up with swollen eyes. Everyone saw the photos. Everyone knows. I am humiliated.
You are not humiliated, Vivian
said firmly.
His
actions are his shame, not yours. Leonard stepped forward. Vivian, this is not the time for whatever this is. We need practical help. Vivian stood and faced her mother directly for the first time in her adult life. Then hire someone practical. I have spent 29 years being your invisible support system, while you publicly diminished me. I have listened to speeches about how Camille shines while I merely function. I have accepted being seated at distant tables, being introduced as the reliable one, being treated as less than human because I was not beautiful enough to matter. The room went completely silent. I am done, Vivian continued, her voice steady. I am done being invisible. I am done accepting that my worth is measured by my usefulness to this family. I am a successful artist, Mother. I have sold paintings for thousands of dollars. I have been building a life you never bothered to notice because you were too busy worshiping at the altar of Camille's beauty. Leonard's face had gone pale. Vivian, I never meant ... You did mean it. Every speech, every comparison, every dismissal, you meant all of it. Vivian took a breath. But I am choosing to forgive you anyway, because holding on to this anger has cost me too much already. She turned back to Camille. I love you. I always have. But I cannot save you from this pain. You have to feel it and grow through it, just like I did. Then she walked out, leaving 30 years of accumulated silence behind her. The charity gala sparkled with Boston's wealthiest citizens. But Vivian barely noticed the crystal chandeliers or the designer gowns. She was focused on the canvas displayed at the center of the room. Her largest painting yet, created specifically for tonight's auction. Dominic stood beside her, his hand warm against her lower back. In the 2 months since her confrontation with her family, everything had changed. She had moved into her own apartment, expanded her studio space, and begun showing her work under her real name. The transition from Vera Nightingale to Vivian Ashford had been terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Are you ready? Dominic asked. Vivian nodded. Tonight, she would give a speech about her art, about finding her voice after years of silence. Tonight, she would step fully into the spotlight she had spent her whole life avoiding. She walked to the podium, aware of hundreds of eyes following her. Among them, she spotted her mother and Camille near the back of the room. They had come. Despite everything, they had come. Thank you all for being here, Vivian began, her voice clear and strong. For most of my life, I believed I was invisible. I believed that worth was determined by external validation, by beauty, by usefulness to others. I spent years creating art in secret because I did not believe anyone would value something I made. She paused, finding Dominic's eyes in the crowd. I was wrong. Not because someone finally saw me, although that helped, but because I finally saw myself. I realized that my years of observing from the shadows had given me something precious, the ability to notice what others overlook, to find beauty in the forgotten corners of the world. The auction raised triple the expected amount. Afterward, as guests mingled and congratulated her, Camille approached hesitantly. That was beautiful, Viv, she said quietly. I am sorry. For everything. For not seeing you. For accepting the way our family treated you. Vivian pulled her sister into a hug. I know. I forgive you. Later that evening, Dominic led her to the rooftop terrace where they had first truly talked. Months ago at the engagement party, the city sparkled below them like scattered diamonds. I have something to ask you, Dominic said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, simple and elegant, set with a stone that caught the starlight perfectly. Vivian Ashford. You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. You are brave, talented, compassionate, and strong. I do not want to rescue you. I want to stand beside you while you continue rescuing yourself. Will you marry me? Vivian looked at the ring, then at the man holding it. A year ago, she would have believed this moment was impossible, that women like her did not get chosen by men like him. Now she knew better, yes, she said. Absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like moonlight and new beginnings. Below them, the city continued its endless motion. But up here, wrapped in his arms, Vivian finally felt still. She had spent her whole life being invisible. Now, finally, she was seen.